Live from the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences in beautiful downtown Raleigh, it's the Science Cafe.
Good evening. Those of you who are regular Science Cafe attendees will think I'm Chris Smith, but I'm not. Chris is on vacation, but besides, it was an honor to introduce a fellow museum director, which I will have the pleasure of doing in a few minutes. So welcome, whether this is your first time or nth time, to the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences and to a Science Cafe. Just by a show of hands, for whom is this your first Science Cafe? Most of them are in the expensive seats over here. So I'm Emlyn Costa, the director of the museum since 2013, and it's my honor to welcome and to facilitate this evening's Science Cafe. Because some of you have not been here before, let me just set a little bit of a stage for our special guest. You know, once upon a time, a visit to a museum was simply an experience of seeing static exhibits, and you probably didn't see many staff on the floor, if any, other than security guards that told you to be quiet and don't run. Some of you remember museums like that, I'm sure. The museum of today is a very dynamic place with multiple types of learning environments, as those of you who know this museum well will appreciate. The Natural History Museum, part of the museum field, has been getting together on occasions over the last couple of decades in Paris in the 90s, in Washington, D.C. in 2012, and in Taipei, Taiwan in 2013, to collectively consider the role that we play in society and environment. And I was at the one in the Smithsonian in 2017, which was a gathering of some 40 institutions from across the United States and Canada, and was part of writing the declaration, which I will just give you these two brief excerpts, because it very much ties the Natural History Museum of Palestine and the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences. Part of that declaration in 2012, ladies and gentlemen, talked about the obligation, the calling upon museums of nature, of natural history, of natural science, to give voice to the Earth's immense story, and to do so knowing that this is a critical moment in the continuity of time. Those are quotes from that declaration. We at this museum, we've been around since 1879, but if you know this place, you'll know that it leapt forward with two major expansions. One in 2000 that led to the building that's at the other end near Bicentennial Mall opposite the History Museum, which today we would say has the purpose of telling us how do we know, what do we know. This wing opened just over 5 years ago on Earth Day 2012 and has been tremendously successful. And it's focused on research, and it asks the question, how do we know what we know? In between is the Daily Planet Theater, which is about what's happening now. And all of this presents itself out of the museum into the community, around the state and around the nation. The fourth question, which is how does the public participate, which brings us into citizen science, and we're going to be hosting the U.S. Citizen Science Conference in 2019. So our mission here is to illuminate the interdependence of nature and humanity, and we ask that through those questions that I just mentioned, and through the values of innovation, collaboration, and innovation. Inclusion, collaboration, and innovation. And so science cafes have been a major part of that innovation. They've been with us for 12 years. They've been every week practically since this building opened in 2012. They originate with the European concept of pub science, and in Paris, in France, with the concept of café scientifique. So that's a little bit of a background. Science cafes, each of them happens usually through an introduction of an opportunity for a topic or an individual or somebody visiting our area. And I want to thank, in this regard, two colleagues from North Carolina State University, Professor Rob Dunn in Applied Ecology, who's traveling for research at the moment, but we do have with us, and I'd ask you to thank Professor Jim Rice, also of Applied Ecology and a fisheries specialist. Jim, please, thank you. We rely on our colleagues, and we're extensively connected with NC State and the UNC system in general. So I'm here with a great pleasure to introduce our guest, Dr. Mazin Kumsiyer, founder and director of the Palestine Museum of Natural History and of the Palestine Institute of Biodiversity and Sustainability, connected with Bethlehem University. This institution, and I quote its vision, it sounds similar to what I just told you about this museum, is to empower responsible human interactions with all components of our environment to promote a sustainable ecosystem. Sounds very similar to us. We're both connected by the International Council of Museums. Mazin has previously been on the faculties of the University of Tennessee and of Duke University and Yale University. What's incredible about the institution that you're going to hear about this evening is it not only has been founded by our guest, but he and his wife are full-time volunteers. Most museum directors complain about not having enough money and being paid too little, but here we have an incredible situation of someone who's not paid at all and is doing his job entirely as a volunteer. I think that deserves some applause. It has a total of 3 employees, but it looks much larger than that when you see the images, and has extensive partnerships with departments at the university in Bethlehem. Mazin comes to us on a national tour, having previously been in Denver, Albuquerque, Austin, Texas, New Orleans, Houston 2 nights ago, Raleigh tonight and this afternoon, and going to the Smithsonian at the Washington, D.C. tomorrow. He's been visiting museums, libraries, universities, research centers, nonprofit groups, and churches. And if I tell you that his 2 recent papers in refereed journals, of course, have been on the role of museums and botanical gardens and ecosystem services and environmental conservation, you get a sense of how this person is not just running a museum as a volunteer with his wife, but also playing a major role in the advance of museology and in conservation science. So we're here to hear about biodiversity and conservation in the Holy Land. This Science Cafe will have the same format as all others. We will hear from our guest for about 20 minutes with his illustrations on the screens around the room, and then there will be a facilitated conversation, and you have evaluations on your tables. I invite you to fill them out. And so at this point, please welcome our guest, Dr. Mazin Kumsiyer, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks for coming, everybody. It's a full house tonight, and I was truly honored by visiting North Carolina State University this morning and this afternoon at the museum, learning a lot of new ideas that hopefully we can implant.
All right, could the cafe staff be quiet, please?
So that we can basically develop similar ideas in Palestine. I want to thank Dr. Burhan Ghanayem, Dr. Jim Rice, Dr. Rob Dunn for arranging this tour for me in North Carolina. And of course, Director, thank you very much for the very kind words you said that are humbling, and I have to measure up to them, I guess. I also think that it's very critical to understand that I'm not here just to lecture to you, and hopefully it's a conversation, and I'll say a few words, but then I'll show about 20 slides in 10 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever it takes me, and then we'll have some conversation. But more important than that, my trip in the US and at these museums is to exchange information. So and work towards collaboration. So for example, this morning, even on the spot, we decided to apply for this grant for a research hub at Bethlehem University through the US State Department that they called for, and hopefully this will come through so that we can do some things together with North Carolina State University. So if you don't like what I have to say, maybe I'll be here back. But anyway, there is Dr. Magdalena, for example, which we want to work with her on ants, and Dr. Martha Reiskind, and on many other projects. And Art, we talked a little bit about potentially working on snails together, etc. So I think there's a lot of potential for doing very, very good work collaboratively, and science is very collaborative, as you know, and so we publish, even though we're a small museum, we publish a lot of papers, but all of them are done collaboratively, even with our students and so forth. So with that, let me just tell you a little bit about the museum and what we are trying to do. And you can watch on the screen if you want a little bit on what I'm showing. So our mission is threefold in research, education, and conservation. Our motto is respect. First, as people, we need to respect ourselves. That's empowerment. We can't blame our problems, whether environmental or otherwise, always on other people. We need to take responsibility for what we are doing personally. And so personal responsibility. And then respect for others, whether they are Jewish, Christian, Muslim, whoever. And this reminds me also, thanks to Jewish Voice for Peace, who organized part of the national tour that I'm doing here, where I talk about other things, but that's another story. And then respect for nature. So respect for nature is where we actually learn to respect all fellow creatures on this earth and where they are and who they are. And this museum here in Raleigh does exactly that, and I'm really very honored by being here. Palestine, of course, is we are truly honored to be in that part of the world, because it's in a very unique position. Not only is it the Fertile Crescent where humans first developed agriculture, that's where we first went from hunter-gatherers to agricultural communities, you know, the Natufian agricultural period, as we call it. And then our ancestors, the Canaanites, who of course built all these wonderful technologies of agriculture and domesticated things like wheat and barley and lentils and chickpeas, hummus, if you like hummus. So this is what it is, but it's also unique in its position for other creatures, and this is, for example, as an example, you know, that we are central for bird migration from Europe and Asia towards Africa. Annually, 500 million birds pass through Palestine. We have a rich biodiversity, animals, plants, but also people, you know. These people, for example, the Canaanites, whose descendants are like these, my relatives, my ancestors. We have very rich agricultural history, natural history. We are really lucky in having this structure there. You know, people think about the conflict there in the Middle East, but that's tiny part of our history, and it's not really a big deal of our history when you add up 11,000 years of civilization. How many years were in conflict? Very few years as a percentage. It's actually less than Europe or North America in that sense. So this luck, of course, now, as you know, we humans face existential threats. The existential threats we face are one of two things that could kill us as a species. One is climate change, and the other is nuclear war. And we have to address these challenges that we face. And the old saying, you know, think globally and act locally is apt here. We have to think globally, but we also have to act locally. So the question for us at the museum, from its founding, when I sat down at the first meeting with the volunteers, and I'm one of them, as you heard, we were all volunteers. We didn't have those 3 employees at the time. We didn't have them for 2 years. We just had them this year. So we sat down, we decided what is it that we want to do, and how is it that we want to do it? Well, one is to do things based on scientific methods, learn what challenges we face, and then do something about them. Not just say, there is a problem. You know, it's not like that. We have to be able to do something about the challenges we face. So challenges we face are very many, and I don't have time to go through them or explain in detail about them, but there are challenges. For example, if you look at this map, and the Jordan Valley, how the water was diverted from the Jordan Valley, resulting in desertification of the Jordan Valley. These are human-induced changes that affect the habitat and nature and biodiversity. And the Dead Sea is shrinking, and this is touristically and otherwise is harmful. Environmentally, it's harmful, as you see the Dead Sea shrinking. And now there's a project, unfortunately, supported by governments, but opposed by every single environmental group there. Israeli environmental groups, Palestinian environmental groups, Jordanian environmental groups, all oppose this project, which is a Red Sea, Dead Sea canal that will bring water from the Red Sea, will desalinate it, and dump the sludge basically into the Dead Sea. Again, this has a tremendous impact on the environment, which we studied some of it. We have challenges, for example, with water issues that are related somehow to the political situation, but that's another story. The question is really what to do when we know that climate change, and this is computer models that are very well known now, that in the next 20 to 25 years, there will be a reduction of about 25% in water fall in our region. And if you look at the graph on the right with the unequal distribution of water, which happens in all societies, by the way, even in America here, this unequal distribution of water will get even more tremendously impacting the populations as time goes by when we have less rainfall. So what to do about things like that? What to do about this, for example, where you have human development. For example, this hill where I used to, as a child, used to go watch birds and catch butterflies and so on, and what it looked like in 1997 on the top and what it looks like today with an Israeli settlement now there. Okay, so what to do about these things? So I told you the museum has a threefold mission: research, education, conservation. Now, why is research first? Because I cannot do anything without really knowing about it in a scientific way. For example, if I want to study the impact of human activity in Bethlehem, I need to know what's going on in Bethlehem in a scientific way. So we did some studies like on decline in vertebrate biodiversity in Bethlehem over the past 40 years and so on. We do studies even that are interesting, like this study with my students and others, where we did some work on the diet of the eagle owl. You know, the eagle owls, like all owls, swallows its prey intact, spits out the bones, and the bones accumulate under its nest. And the bones, of course, that are older are down at the bottom, and the newer bones are at the top. So this way you can check what is the animals it used to eat 30, 40 years ago, and what's the animals that it's eating now. And what we find in the Bethlehem region, this region of Bethlehem, the diet of the eagle owl changed tremendously, so that now 60% of its diet is actually rats, commensal rats around human populations. This is, you know, indicative of how much problems we face environmentally in those areas. Oops, sorry. I know you can't read the writing, but it's okay. We studied, for example, the top is a paper that we published in the International Journal of Environmental Studies about the impact of human activities, Palestinian human activities of recycling computers. They take computers, they get, most of Israeli computers, by the way, end up on the Palestinian side being recycled for wires, copper, etc. And this has a huge impact because they even burn the plastic, and this causes cancers. And so we see cancer rates in this area increasing. So we studied genotoxic effects of recycling computers in that area. Or in the bottom paper, for example, the effect of Israeli industrial settlements that are put next to Palestinian villages and towns that dump toxic waste on the Palestinian areas that result in basically also increased in DNA damage, chromosome breaks, etc. These are published in internationally recognized, peer-reviewed, and of course, case-controlled studies. Our research you know, people want research budgets. They say, well, the museum budget for my museum is about $40,000 operating budget this past year, okay? And I have 3 employees who take up most of that money, so that leaves little money for supplies. So, but we can do a lot of research. Why? Because we have a lot of volunteers, a lot of students. For example, the student, Muhammad Abu Sarhan, who wrote this paper on the butterflies, was actually a freshman in biology when he decided to work on the butterflies of Palestine and published this paper. So we can get a lot of free labor, if you want, doing that and publishing research articles like this. We also publish, as you heard from the director, on the areas of museology. For example, these are 3 of our papers. The top one is the use of museums in environmental education. How do we use museums to enhance understanding of climate change? This, for example, you know, and this requires some research, because I cannot teach a 5-year-old like I teach a 10-year-old or like I teach a 30-year-old. It has to be tailor-made, and it has to be also tailor-made to the culture of the people that I'm trying to get them to learn. I don't say even teach is probably not the right word, because now it's student-centered learning, and the same for museum visitor. And I'm glad, you know, what I saw here, for example, one of the ideas, how you got the museum visitors to interact directly with the researchers and people working behind glass about different things. This is interactive, and interactive experiences always last with you. You know, the Chinese have a saying, I hear and I forget, I see and I remember, I do and I understand. So we need people to do things so that they can understand, touch things, feel things. And the other 2 papers about use of botanical gardens, and those are the ones I shared with you earlier. And so it's how we can use them in developing countries, museums and botanical gardens, to enhance environmental conservation. Now, the museum, as I told you, is kind of new, and we had our opening actually 2 months ago in April. And this is the first tour I take outside for both fundraising and talking to people, building support, mostly not fundraising, mostly building support and getting people to actually help us technically, and advice, and human capacity building, I say, is very critical. But we have a lot of work to do in there ourselves. And we just installed our solar panels, so now the museum is all operating on solar electricity. As I mentioned 2 months ago, we opened the exhibit area. It's not much of you know, it's not like this. I'm drooling when I'm watching what you have here. So I wish I had the resources to do this. But we still have some things, interesting things, for example, some paleontological and geological material. And we have a geologist actually, also volunteer, by the way, who will publish his first paper under the title of the museum, actually, on some foraminifera and things like that. But anyway, when we bring kids to the museum, whether in the exhibit area or outside the exhibit area in the garden, we have a beautiful garden that's now, we have medicinal plants, herbal plants. We have a small ecosystem of water which have 3 species of frogs, 2 species of fish, dragonflies flying around, butterflies flying around. So people enjoy this kind of nature direct interactions. But even inside, we have kids like this one, for example, which you see he's wearing a heavy thing that makes him feel like a scorpion. And so it's kind of an interesting thing. And we got kids to, for example, discover life cycle of insects. In this case, they are life cycle of mealworms. And I just discovered, I learn something new every day, by the way. I just discovered in your museum here that mealworms will eat styrofoam. It's very, very new information for me. And actually, the poop they produce will be compost. So, so it's good. We can start feeding them styrofoam instead of expensive mealworms, which what do you call it? Oatmeal, I'm sorry. Anyways, we also have kids recycle things and take gifts with them home. We don't have a nice gift shop that they can buy ready-made toys. So they come to the museum and tell them we can make your own gift. So by recycling plastics and stuff, they can, we show them how they do it, recycling paper, etc. This touch feel, again, you know, the idea of learning by doing is very important for us. We also have a program. So we do have gatherings like what you have, a science cafe, where we discuss things with the adults in the community. But with children, we take them to the field, because the field is, in our humble opinion, the best museum there is. To see nature, to interact with nature, to play. Again, you see the T-shirts that they are wearing. It says, respect for nature is respect for ourselves. This is empowerment for Palestinian kids who, many of them come from poor families, refugee communities, etc. Have no possibility. We pay, actually, for their travel. And I use sometimes donations like the ones I collected on this trip for those kinds of projects. We are very ambitious. This is the plan for the garden coming forward, and this is what the museum will look like going forward. This is my dream, that this will be realized someday. You will come and visit, it'll be ready. Now it doesn't look like this. You can go on our website, which is palestinenature.org, has a videotape of what this thing looks like today. And we have brochures here in the front, which you're welcome to come and get. And I'm also going to pass out sign-up sheet if anybody wants to be on our email list for the museum friends. We're thinking, actually, another idea I got from the Houston Museum, which actually is not government supported, but seems to be doing very fine, is membership and so forth. We're planning to do membership in the museum by local people and people abroad. And this hopefully will generate a little bit of revenue for the museum. So we do have very ambitious plans. This Institute of Biodiversity and Sustainability, as of next year, will start offering diplomas and afterwards masters in sustainability, master degrees in sustainability, including in things like permaculture, aquaculture, aquaponics, which we are doing now at the museum and using as educational tools. We even brought 12 agricultural engineers from Gaza, and it took us a while to get the permits for them, but we managed through German colleagues to get the permits for them to come from Gaza and learn about aquaponics, and now they're growing fish and vegetables in Gaza. And so it is possible to do a lot of things with very minimal resources. If you have the will, as they say, you know, you can find the way. I will stop here because I'd like more interactions, and I really thank you again very much for your hospitality, for your kindness, and to the people who brought us here, and to the people who welcomed us. And I'm staying at Burhan's house, so he's taking care of me. He even bought me this nice suit, and it's the first time I wear a suit in 20 years. So, but thank you, Burhan.
Initial thank you, sir. So if you are ready with a question, show either Katie or Luann, who have the microphones, and we'll be ready for you in just a moment or so. I just want to ask a first question, if I may, and that is, in your area, I wonder to what extent it's like this area, where we talk about children no longer going outside for reasons of lack of family history, or a sense of it's unsafe, or they don't understand, or there isn't the time in their lives, or they're too hooked to handheld whatevers. Are you sometimes the child's first exposure to nature?
Yes, and it's remarkable because we were asking this question yesterday at the dinner that we had in the Mediterranean Delhi here, where we had a group of people. I was asking them about how, this is our biggest challenge, by the way. How do we get our kids to stop?
Hold the microphone close.
You know, the kids to stop using this Facebook, you know, things where they think they have friends by like, and to start being back to nature, if you want. So how do you do it? Well, how we do it is we don't wait for them to come to us. We go to them. So we have projects going to schools, building environmental clubs at school, offering them free trips. This is always important, especially, you know, as I said, marginalized communities where they don't get to go out, you know, they don't get to travel around. 40% unemployment, by the way, we have, which is more than you had here in the Depression. So what we do is we offer them that incentive to go out and see the beauty of Palestine, see springs, see water, see nature, watch birds. We give them these binoculars. Many of them have never used the binocular to look at the bird. And it's remarkable, the change that happens in children once they touch the earth, once they touch plants and animals, and really, as I said, not just hear and see things, but actually play with things and do things. We have a center now for rehabilitation of injured animals at the museum. And so we show them to take care of little injured animals or stray dogs or something like that. And it's remarkable how much this gives them a sense of connectivity, and not just to nature, but to people. Again, that goes back to the respect part that I was saying about, is it gives them the sense of self-respect. They realize they can do something, and it has been transformative. I mean, yesterday also at dinner, I mentioned the story of a guy who came to me, and I thought he was angry at me because he asked, "What did you do to my daughter?" And in a voice that sounded like strong. So I said, "Well," he said, "Well, you know, she came to your museum and she came back transformed, and she doesn't want me to smoke and doesn't want me to do this." I said, "So are you angry about that?" He said, no, I just came to thank you." I said, "Well, the tone of voice scared me for a while." So anyways, so yeah, I mean, it's doable. It's not easy. We're always looking for new ideas, and part of the reason I came here is to look for new ideas. For example, at the Houston Museum of Science, wonderful, by the way, museum, they have this Hall of Curiosities, remarkable hall. I cannot do a Hall of Curiosity, but I can do a corner of curiosity maybe at our museum, and we have a lot of curiosities that we can do.
Well, so thank you, and I guess as we go to the audience's questions, I would want to commend you, if I may, director to director, that you've been pulled forward by passion and vision in 3 short years, and 3 staff just a few months ago, and I think we'd all recognize how much you've achieved and how great is your impact, both in the answer you just gave, but also as a sort of a new influence and a new part of the infrastructure of how people of all ages and backgrounds can get closer to nature. Katie?
Thank you so much for your comments and for engaging us in conversation. You started, or toward the beginning of your talk, you spoke of the museum not only wanting to study and to discover and to publish, but also to do. Mm-hmm. And that means that policymakers, government, the citizenry will have to be engaged in the doing.
Yes.
So here, as I'm sure you know, there's a suspicion of science and of smart people and highly educated people as, especially maybe in government, as an elite activity that is self-serving and very expensive. And it expresses itself often in a kind of anti-intellectual way. Yeah. I'm wondering if you encounter, if the culture around science and action is like that in Palestine, or is it different? What kind of response do you get?
That's a very good question. Yes, our challenge as educators in general is not to live in ivory towers separated from our societies. And you heard I taught at Duke and Yale universities. In Palestine, it's even more urgent to do that, to connect to societies, to connect to the authorities like the municipalities, the Palestinian Authority, etc., and to try and convince them to do certain things which many times it's like pulling teeth to convince the adults. The children, it's much easier. But we do it, and I'll tell you some of the things that we do. For example, I'm a consultant to two ministries, Ministry of the Environment, which is now called the Environmental Quality Authority, and also Ministry of Health. In Ministry of Health, for example, they appointed me head of a technical committee to look at priorities for healthcare research in particular, and so on. And of course, environmental health is a big issue, but also genetic health, for example, because, for example, Palestinians, there's a lot of family marriages. My background, medical genetics, 40% of weddings in rural areas of Palestine are first cousin marriages, which increases the rate of autosomal recessive conditions. So we work with them and we try to convince them of the value of what? Of using science and scientific information so that they understand the economic and other impact, health impact, etc. of this. With the Environmental Quality Authority, it's an uphill struggle still. For example, they do have wonderful laws on the books, but they're not enforced. For example, that every new building or factory or whatever needs an environmental impact assessment study. But then, okay, so they go to these engineering companies who know nothing about the environment. They issue a certificate that says they did an environmental impact study, and the government accepts it. And I said, you shouldn't accept this nonsense. Much of it is copy and paste even. I mean, my students at the university, if they do that, they get an F, you know? So, so it is not acceptable. It's an uphill struggle. But I also have to balance where I spend my time. Should I spend my time creating a new generation, or should I spend my time with office people who are sitting on desks who don't know anything about anything? And sometimes you talk about evolution and it's like, okay, you're an infidel, you know? So we have challenges, but we try to deal with them and we try to balance where we spend our time. I think that's actually the biggest challenge we have, is how to educate people and how to reach out to them, how to do it in a scientific way so that they can't criticize you if you do it scientifically and if you say this is the data. You know, these are the data. You cannot argue with data. If you have alternative data, please give it to me, or as I say here, now there's alternative facts according to whether we have climate change or we don't have. It's an opinion after all. So anyways.
Joanne.
Thank you for wonderful talk and inspiring talk, I think, more than anything else. I'm really impressed that how you are able to engage students, the kids especially. And I think that's probably where, we need to start. Any countries, doesn't matter which part of the world it is. And I'm wondering, what do you think is the scope of doing public science or citizen science with the kids, as well as
doing
their
public
parents?
what? I'm
Citizen
sorry.
Public science or citizen science?
Oh yeah.
I mean, it looks like it's a wonderful opportunity, but even then, even with in a country where there's a lot of problems that kids are facing in their day-to-day life, so what do you think we could do with citizens doing citizen science?
I mean, that's what our aim is. You know, the guy I told you, the young freshman who published the paper on butterflies, he actually started with us when he was in high school, doing public science, going out with us in the field, measuring things, collecting things. So he got the interest. So once that spark starts, that's how I started, by the way. My uncle used to take me with him to the field, and he was the first Palestinian zoologist in the 1960s, and used to take me with him to the field. And that's how, as a child, 7, 8, 9-year-old, I learned to love nature and love to do inquiry, basically. So that's what we are trying to emulate, and to work along those lines. Our limitations is not the ideas or the concepts or the material. Our limitation is really the people. And that's why I said human capacity building. If I had more people who can take kids outside and I can rely that they know what they are doing, I don't want them to take them just, hey, look, there's a nice bird out there, you know. That's not, so this takes time, and education is, so the 3 employees I have in the museum, only one of them is education. The other one has to take care of the garden, the botanical garden, the aquaculture, aquaponics, you know, the fish, all the animals, etc., that are alive. And then the other one is working inside to, you know, prepare insects, publish research papers, etc., supervise students, masters, and undergraduate who come to the museum. So that leaves really just this one woman who is doing education brilliantly, but now she decided to go do a PhD in Germany. So which is fine. Maybe she'll come back after she finishes, and that will be fine. And I'm helping her to go there. That's another way we can collaborate, by the way, is by sending our students here to get education, get a PhD at NC State, and then come back. But we have to guarantee that you guys don't entice them to stay here.
Roy? And
So,
both of you? Go ahead, Roy.
During your presentation, I was struck by your mention, just almost in passing. There it was, and then it went, and it was about global warming and the effects that that's going to have in your area. And here in North Carolina and in America, there's a lot of discord in our body politic all the time. There's talk about strife in our inner cities and all of these things, and the news projects so much of that. And there's lots of distraction about these kinds of topics, but there's this very, very big topic, global warming, and how profoundly it will change and force issues upon us. And I'm just wondering, in your area, if that's the same thing, that you find that people are just not paying attention to that because of all of this other distraction and so forth.
Yeah, it's a very good question. Actually, you know, there's this global climate fund that's now available, and we just applied for some money, part of it, to basically do adaptation and mitigation of climate change effect, not just on the people, but of course on the ecosystems and the biodiversity of the area. So if we get that money, we'll do a lot more, for example, in education. And there's also a number of ideas we put there in the proposal, including like planting barrier kinds of trees for desertification that's spreading up into the Judean hills in Palestine, etc. So we do have a big challenge. And I mentioned the water part of it because that's critical, you know, and water is life. I mean, at my home, sometimes for 2 or 3 weeks, I don't have water. So how am I going to have a botanical garden? So we started harvesting rainwater, learning how to do things. And the modules that we learn in the museum, so the museum garden now acts as an experimental research station for how to do things. For example, the aquaponics. Aquaponics that we taught those engineers from Gaza is a brilliant response to climate change in terms of food security. Why? Because you can use very limited water, very limited land, and you can produce both meat, fish, and vegetables at the same time, because the water of the fish used as a fertilizer for the plants. So it's a brilliant response to that. And now I have even in refugee camps people putting aquaponics on their roofs. Remarkable, you know? And they are enjoying, you know, taking care of these fish and vegetables and stuff like that. So there's a lot that we can do. But again, we're doing it on I mean, I don't want to mislead you in thinking that we have this grand scale things, because as I said, we are tiny, literally. So we're doing things on small scale, but every one of these modules can be expanded and done much, much more at a bigger scale. And now I am in the period of starting to write big grant proposals. The one I just will put in for the U.S. State Department will be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, which will make a huge difference for us. So and we rely, of course, also on individual donations and people, like Burhan donated, many others donated. In Houston, I collected $13,000, which is remarkable. So it's going to be very, very good. I am very optimistic that we can scale up our activities, including in response to climate change in the Palestinian areas very, very quickly. And if we get that grant from the Global Climate Fund, but I heard something about the US withdrawing from supporting that. So I don't know if these grants will come through or not. It could help us in adaptation, mitigation of climate change. But the educational component is very cheap. We do it with volunteers and so forth. So that we will do and continue to do. And I assure you, this year there are many more Palestinians who know about climate change than 5 years ago or 10 years ago, whatever.
Roy, was there another question in front of you? Yes, please. Go ahead, please.
I'm intrigued by the butterfly paper, and I wonder if you can tell us about its conclusions. Is it a conservation story, population, or is the number of species going up, going down? What did this young man find?
Yeah, so we studied the kinds of butterflies. Now I forget, I think it's 40 some species that he managed to document. But more importantly, yes, there are some butterflies. On the picture that you saw, there's one with an orange tip. That's found left in only 2 places in the whole West Bank. So it is an endangered species, if you want. And the follow-up on this paper, if I can find the master student interested in butterflies, is to actually list the species and study their ecology. For example, a few of them we know are migratory because we actually could see them moving in a particular direction in a particular part of the year, like in March and late March, early April for the checkered butterfly that we have. And they migrate all the way to Lebanon and Syria and Turkey and so forth and come back. So it's remarkable, and I would like to study the ecology of butterfly. This was, the paper that you saw is basically what we call alpha level, the primary level, just what's there, where is it? That's it, not much about the ecology. A little talk about like the potentiality of endangered species like this orange-tipped one. But other than that, not much.
The slide you showed of the hemispheric migration of tens of millions of birds is a striking opportunity, I wonder, to have Palestine see itself as this interdependent middle part of this massive annual south to north, north to south migration route of wildlife. And it sort of opens up a much wider horizon of context. Is that an opportunity for your museum to get that better understood by your own residential area?
Yes, and we have an ornithologist who just finished his PhD, and unfortunately I could hire him as a consultant for a couple of months and then don't have money to continue hiring him. He's looking for a job. He's the only PhD ornithologist in Palestine that I know of. Got his PhD, by the way, at an Israeli university. But anyways, we are writing together, he and I are writing a grant for some people in the Gulf state, but it seems now with the political situation we will not get this money. If we get the money for raptors, studying raptors, migrating raptors, which are most endangered in our region, it could expand. So the museum role in ornithology could expand. We are members of the Ornithological Union. I think it's called the International Ornithological Union. And we do get their magazine, and there are some people, their head office is in the Middle East, is in Amman, and I visited it, and I couldn't believe how generous they were. They donated like books and books, streams of books on birds, so it is been very good in that sense. And this ornithologist that we have took remarkable pictures, by the way, of birds. I wish I had chance to show you some of the bird wildlife. We have the national bird. There's a very tiny bird called the Palestine sunbird, which is actually the one that is on the brochure. If you looked at the brochure, the picture on the upper, and it's also the motto for the museum. The sunbird is also on the, what do you call that, the insignia of the museum or whatever. But the Palestine sunbird is a tiny sunbird with a nice bluish and orange tuft under the wing, and really a remarkable species.
You mentioned that, of course, the catastrophic effects that would be expected from nuclear problems and also from climate change and so forth. But I'm just wondering, normally, you know, wars have changed. What's been going on in Palestine in the occupation is many, many decades, as well as some kind of a warfare going on for many decades, as opposed to the old wars that used to last 4 years if it was a big war. And I'm just wondering, are there any studies done as to what long-term and perhaps even irreversible effects are done with that kind of a situation?
Yeah, we actually, and I'm happy to share with you, if you want my card, will be here. You can get my card. You can send me an email. I'll send you some of our own articles about the effect of, for example, the occupation, long-term colonization, occupation of Palestine on the Palestinian environment, etc. But I would say that much, much more research needs to be done. And it has to be independent scientific research, not politicized. And unfortunately, there's very little of that done. Politics tend to overwhelm everything, so people don't seem to, and I don't know how to describe it, but it's, I mean, I tell people, pollution doesn't respect borders, doesn't respect, you know, the environment is for everybody. It's not a matter of Israelis, Palestinians, whatever. It's ridiculous, you know. When Israel, for example, prevents the sewage treatment facilities from being built in Gaza, and the people of Gaza dump their sewage into the sea, where is this going to go? With water currents, it's running up to Jaffa and Tel Aviv, and literally the Israelis are swimming in the shit of Gaza because of a political decision. The environmentalists in Israel understand this. The environmentalists in Palestine understand it. The common people understand it. It's just a matter of we need to get together and lobby our own governments to stop thinking about me and them, us and them, whatever. We need to start thinking about how we can solve these problems and how we can live together. That's the bottom line.
Let me ask you about museums in the region at the eastern end of the Mediterranean, from the top of the Red Sea up to Turkey. Where are natural history museums? You mentioned this to me today. I think the next one is is up the coast a long way. Could you just paint that map for us?
Yeah, so we don't have many museums. Iraq used to have a very good natural history museum. By the way, it's, I don't know what happened to it. Most museums in Iraq were pillaged basically after the war or during the war of 2003. In Lebanon, there's at the American University of Beirut a very good natural history museum. And Tel Aviv, they're about to open a natural history museum. I saw the pictures of the new building that's just being constructed in the shape of a Noah's Ark. I am not sure myself if that's a good idea, but but anyway, that's a natural. It will be like a shape of a ship, you know, including all these animals. But so there is a few, but I'm not trying. I mean, the uniqueness of what I'm trying to do is not build a natural history museum, to be honest. I'm not interested in a museum in the classical sense of museums, where people come and see stuffed animals and nice butterflies and nice shells and go, wow, you know, and then go home. I'm interested in what? I'm interested in those interactions I was showing you and the experimentation with kids and what you are doing here. That's what I'm interested in. Yeah, I'm interested in how we can get the visitor to have an experience that changes their behavior. To me, that's the museum I'm looking for. I'm not looking to emulate a museum like in other countries. And especially under situations where we face, situations of impoverishment and so forth, I want the museum to benefit people. How is it going to benefit people? Benefits them by showing them that they can actually grow their own vegetables in their own, on the walls. We have walls that they use recycled plastic bottles to grow their own herbs and plants and vegetables, or in their roofs, or that they can recycle aluminum and get a few pennies out of aluminum and so forth. That improves their economy. To me, or using compost. Now I have in 8 schools in the Bethlehem district, regular collection of composted, compost organic material from student family kitchens. They bring it to the school, and at the school they do the composting, and then they take this composted material, fertilizer, and it's better than, by the way, the commercial fertilizer that they buy, which they have to pay money for. And what do the students do? They go hawk it, they sell it, which is fine, That's what I want to do. This is, to me, is the proper role of a museum that's connected to society, not a museum that's just out there for beauty. And
one of the sayings in the museum field is that we'd like, if you liken the visit to a museum to a funnel, the wide end is the front door, maybe many visits, many times through that front door, but over time, life long, life wide, life deep, we'd like the mind of the visitor to move from maybe disinterest to interest, to insight, to action. And that the museum has this ultimate
That's a
effect
good way to look at
it. To sort of have that ultimate effect. We have one last question from Katie's colleague over there.
I just wanted to ask, how many places have the solar panels to help produce the energy for their buildings? I mean, does the university also have that? And is that developing?
Yeah, it's spreading in Palestine like wildfire because we cannot rely on electricity, which comes to us from Israel, because Israel doesn't allow us to build our own electric power generating plants. So we have to do this. And fortunately, so far, Israel has allowed us to import solar panels. And so many people are using it. The local electric company, which acted as a reseller, basically, Palestinian company, was forced reluctantly to accept this, provided that we do not produce more than 10% of our annual consumption. In other words, if we produce more than, the 110% of what our previous consumption or our annual consumption is, then we don't get to sell it back to them. So they get it free, basically. So if we use less electricity, of course, the power goes back to the electric company and they can sell it to others. So that way the electric company gets to continue to benefit, which is okay. I mean, 10% is, if you measure it right, you put the right panels that you need for your usage, you're never going to use more than 110% of what you want. So 10% they pay you back, they give you money, So it's good.
Let me again thank Rob Dunn and Jim Rice from NC State for suggesting or pointing out that there was an opportunity for this museum to be on the circuit between Houston and Washington. We're very grateful that you wanted to stop here. I know you had great interactions last evening in the Chapel area, this morning at NC State, and this afternoon with our biodiversity and molluscan and which other area was visited? And genetics. So thank you very much for the honor of your visit. I applaud, if I may repeat, that it's an incredible story that you bring in terms of the pace and the vision of your impact and productivity with such a little resource base. But again, I think for you and your wife, evidently, full-time volunteers to have such passion and vision to pull this place forward and to be an inspiration for museums that you may want to be like, but are already gaining insights from your example. So thank you very much, Mazin, for coming.
Thank you. And I forgot to mention Peggy. Peggy was instrumental in this. And if people want to donate tax deductible, there's Bethlehem University Foundation. You can find it on the web, and you can donate. And the brochures are here.
Business cards, and please fill out the evaluations if you would. We greatly value
Thank you.